Playing video games is a completely different experience from watching a movie or reading a book. And the main difference is that in video games, well, you have a choice. Even in the most straightforward games, you'll still have a choice on how to approach your goal. And sometimes it leads to outrageous way to play. Yes, I'm looking at you, speedrun community. And the very first choice you usually do right after you start a new game is choosing your brightness. No, but seriously, you need to pick your difficulty. But what's the point? Do we really need it? I mean, it's a hard work for developer to tailor experience not once, but several times for different difficulty settings. And what for? Does it make game more fun? Does it help you to immerse yourself better? Does it make your PP bigger? I don't know. At the very beginning we had arcade. And honestly, there were no need for difficulty settings. Harder, the better. You will die faster and require to feed another quarter to the machine, hence making arcade some profit. And pro players who already got accustomed to these games could actually show off by playing longer than 10 seconds, alluring even more kids to play in the arcade, hence, once again, making the profit. Obviously, everyone wanted arcade experience at home. First of all, so you don't need to go to arcade every time you want to play, and, most importantly, that you don't need to pay after every fail. And then, you know, video game crisis, people losing money, jobs, yada yada.
This is fine.
Nintendo came and gave people what they actually wanted. Video games where you would play like something resembling, well, something, not just a bunch of shapes. This is where a lot of legendary renowned franchises started. Legend of Zelda, Mario, Metroid. Metroid is still a thing, right? They're not calling it Nintendo Hard for nothing. Usually even normal difficulty was more than enough, so people didn't bother. And logic behind it was pretty simple. For example, you can finish Castlevania in about 20 minutes or so, but it will still cost you $60. So by basically making it really hard, the game gave you illusion that it's much bigger than it actually is. I mean, you wouldn't beat Castlevania in 20 minutes. Most likely you didn't beat Castlevania in 20 years. But with every new console, games become more and more forgiving. And more people could actually play them without breaking controllers and grinding teeth. At some point, games became so casual that normal difficulties stopped being something worth mentioning, and world divided to hardcore and casual gamers. And if before video games were challenging to beat even a normal one, now it was not enough, and you would need to prove yourself by beating the game on the hardest difficulty. At least some games still had some secrets and other content locked behind hard difficulty, so it wasn't all just a dick measuring contest. Someone around 7th generation of consoles, newer games start to preach for inclusivity, like I paid for this game and I want to experience all of it. To be honest, mostly this affected Western games. Japan's one were still ripping your soul and force you to smash your gamepad, especially with series like Tenchu or Ninja Gaiden. Later, this trend started to die out a little, after indie games started to get traction. Games like Super Meat Boy, where the biggest reward was the game itself. And I mean it, to beat the level you need to actually beat it, you could not just casually try a few times and do it. But the problem was that people already got used to convenience of modern gaming, and even the most hardcore one, deep down inside agreed that classic NES difficulty wouldn't make a cut today. I mean, difficulty should be difficult enough for player not to get bored and drop the game after a few hours, but at the same time it shouldn't be too hard so the player gets really frustrated and again drop the game after a few tries. Nowadays we have a ton of indie games, and from software ones, that simply don't have difficulty settings. There's only one, and you either master it or just give up. And, you know, I think it's a good thing. Not all difficulty settings are equal. The laziest one is numbers. This one simply increases the stats of enemies, such as health, damage, armor, or even just simply increasing the number of enemies. Usually you just spend more time to win, but it's definitely not the best option. I mean, theoretically it does require more skills from you, as longer fights mean enemy does have more time catching you making a mistake. But my god, is it boring. You ultimately do the same thing, it just takes longer. And worst of all, it robs you of feeling like a hero. If it takes 100 strikes to take down White Vanguard, but he can kill you in 2-3, why don't he just go and kill all the dragons? To be fair, even this type could work. If attacks are getting deadlier for both, the player will start to think a little harder before engaging, maybe even trying to find additional ways to defeat the foe. This one's odd. On one hand, it does push you to move faster, and unlike previous one, this one could actually force you to change your playstyle. As if some fight, race or puzzle takes too long, you might simply want to avoid it. Nowadays, this one is not a very common type. Mostly it might be used in a level or two, where you would need to hurry up for some reason, but not for the whole game. Usually occurs in races or strategy games. With increasing difficulty, AI becomes more and more proficient, sometimes even leading to outrageous micromanagement that might leave you feeling like you're playing against Korean hive mind. But sometimes you could find it in other games as well, like Fear, where enemies were actually changing their behavior according to difficulty settings. This one is great, but biggest concern is probably the jumps between difficulty could be significant from time to time. So for example, you could feel that hard AI is not challenging enough for you, but very hard is still ripping you a new one. Some games just completely changing the layout of a level. Like for example, an upgrade could be missing from the place it usually is, or more guards could be added, especially to where there were no guards before, or altogether shutting the door you usually use, forcing you to find another way. This one also works great, but usually it's not a random change of a layout. This should be hand-tailored experience. Usually, but not always. Which is really not so common nowadays, in the age of deadlines and shipment of unfinished games. Okay, so now, beside different types of difficulties, there are still issues on how games should choose which experience to provide you, right? And you could be like, what's the problem? Just let the player choose at the start of the game. Right, and most games are actually doing it like this. But starting a new game for the first time, how do you know if hard is actually hard? And don't even start me on this cryptic bullshit. I mean, yes, to avoid such issues, games still does have some secret sublevels of difficulty, and apply them accordingly with your performance. And most probably you notice it. If you keep dying on the same place again and again and again, at some point the game will lower the difficulty specifically for you. Not all games uses this mechanic, but when it's there, you can actually feel it. And even though this mechanic helps you to finish the game, it actually could be really annoying, because it robs you of this feeling of actually defeating the game. Okay, maybe in that case the game should pick the difficulty for you right away based on your performance. Lastly, game might not have any difficulty settings whatsoever, not visible, not secret, none. There's only one adventure prepared specifically for you, and you either endure it and win, or give up and lose, plain and simple. Oh, and besides general difficulty, there are more and more games where you can actually pick different difficulty multipliers for different aspects of the game. Like in an RPG, you might not want to manage the whole party, you just want to concentrate on your character and leave the rest to be managed by AI. But that's all for the game part. But what about the player? Why would the player want to pick a harder difficulty? Most logical answer is that higher difficulty is required for players who finds normal one too easy. Secondly, it might be good for a second playthrough. And lastly, if you're sick in the head and you are a completionist, in that case, games might have achievement for finishing on a certain difficulty, and you just need it. I need it! The most important part about video game difficulty is that it should be fair. I mean, you need to feel that even though it's your 23rd attempt to kill the Ice Wizard, it's still your fault, not the game. If you do have a feeling that level or boss is too hard and you die no matter what you try to do, most probably you will just drop the game and you will never touch it again. Maybe even set it on fire. Just a little. Casual games, on the other hand, exploit it on the whole another level. The most annoying way they tie you in is that they actually give you a glimpse of hope, allowing you to almost achieve victory, only to crash you right at the end. Probably heard about Foo Factor. No, I didn't make it up. You can actually Google it. Basically, the more you defeat it right at the verge of greatness, the more likely you will keep playing. Which, yes, does sound sadistic, but hey, for just $9.99 you can buy these goddamn crystals and finally beat this level. Okay, but really, I have finished Remnant 2 on the Apocalypse difficulty not so long ago. And which gameplay did I enjoy more? Was it more fun on regular, where I could actually crush the whole game with a melee build? Or the Apocalypse, where I was actually forced to maximize everything? Easy question, of course I will go with normal. So, what was this video about? No, it doesn't make your PP bigger.